even threw them in jail.
Peter Navarro,
Steve Bannon,
now in prison.
But they couldn't stop them.
It's not a prison bill that will ever shut me up.
This is America's Voice Live.
And welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gruber.
The pulse of the people.
We need somebody that's going to hear the people's voice.
The truth the mainstream won't touch.
This guy is by definition a globalist.
And the stories that matter.
Rav's own Ben Berquam.
Right up over this hill, we got an armed cartel. I see him.
Live.
Breaking news right now here on Real America's Voice.
Unfiltered.
These people are domestic terrorists.
And unapologetic.
We're here to take a stand for God and country. Does feel good, doesn't it?
America's Voice Live starts now.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gruber. It is Wednesday, May the 28th. Let's get to the day's top stories. As always, thank you for joining us here today. Rasmussen Reports daily presidential tracker is showing that President Trump's approval rating just jumped up. It's +6. And not only that, but they released a new poll showing that more Americans than ever feel that the country is on the right track, heading in the right direction. I'll bring on Rasmussen's head pollster, Mark Mitchell, in a moment to walk us through all the new numbers. Also, the big, beautiful bill has passed the House of Representatives and is now on its way to the Senate. Despite the bill including many great policies, many experts are calling for some big changes. I'll bring in one such expert to explain what should be changed and why, and then later. A top medical school accreditor has suspended diversity requirements after President Trump signed an executive order directing Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, among others, to crack down on ridiculous DEI mandates. All the details and updates coming your way today. But first, I want to come back to this Rasmussen report, to these numbers. More people than ever before in Rasmussen Report's polling history feel that this country is going in the right direction, thanks to President Trump's leadership and this administration. Why does that matter? Simple. Because over the past couple of years, and most notably November's election, Rasmussen got it right. When other polling companies were telling you Kamala Harris was going to win, and she was leading in Iowa, a state she lost, by the way, by 15 points, Rasmussen was steady, on the money. And quite simply, they got it right. And here's Rasmussen Report's leading pollster, Mark Mitchell, breaking it all down. Listen.
But the right direction number has been the sleeper hit. It's been setting records left and right. Only now in Trump 2.0 was the very first time we ever had more people who say the country was on the right direction than on the right track. And there is this stunner from this morning. And this is not some like single nightly overnight number. This is 5 nights. This is about 2,000 U.S. likely voters. So it is a very big and very accurate poll. And for the first time in our polling history, a majority of the electorate says the country's headed in the right direction. Absolutely stunning. Net +5. Never seen anything like that.
I'm sorry, I have to stop you there. Mark, this is the first time ever in Rasmussen's polling?
Going back to 2006. The highest we had ever seen before Trump 2.0 was, I believe, 47%, tied 47% right direction, wrong track, net +0. But in the Trump administration, we broke net +0. We had net +1. We had net +4 last week. And here it is at net +5. And we've never had a 50 handle, ever, period. Going all the way back through the beginning of the Obama administration, going all the way back through Trump 1. Trump 1 had some high numbers. He set a lot of records back then, too. 6 or 7 consecutive weeks above 42. We're at like 17 now. So, I mean, this is just something. Well, listen, I'm a public opinion aficionado. I'm a pollster. I want voters to get more of what they voted for. And this looks like the report card for that. It looks like they're getting what they voted for.
He'll be joining me here in a few minutes. It's important to know that Mark Mitchell has been the one guy getting it right, because Rasmussen Reports is one of the only polling companies who knows how to poll Trump voters. They had Trump winning the election when everyone else called it a long shot, or worse, said he was going to lose. And Mitchell has been challenging this idea that voters have buyer's remorse over the election of Donald Trump. They don't. His poll shows exactly the opposite. More Americans now than ever before are optimistic about this country's future. More good news to back that up. Consumer confidence coming in much higher than expected this month. Again, the biggest monthly increase since March of 2021. Consumer confidence up 12.3 points for a reading of 98. It is only expected to be somewhere in the mid-80s. Now, the media's done a hell of a job trying to scare Americans, people like you, into believing that President Trump is tanking the economy with his hardline stance on tariffs and America first. But polling shows that consumers, they're not buying it. And why all the optimism? As we've already pointed out, the real world conditions are getting better. Lower gas prices, cooling inflation, major investments in American business, like what's happening in Pennsylvania. President Trump says the European Union has indicated it wants to fast-track negotiations with him, so he's willing to push the deadline on 50% tariffs with them back to at least mid-July. Listen.
Did you discuss the 50% tariffs, and did you agree to remove?
She just called me, as you know, and she asked for an extension on the June 1st date. And she said she wants to get down to serious negotiation because I've told you specifically, but I told anybody that would listen, they have to do that. And we had a very nice call, and I agreed to move it. I believe June 9th, it would be July 9th would be the date. That was the date she requested. Could we move it from June 1st to July 9th? And I agreed to do that. And that she said we will rapidly get together and see if we can work something out.
And it'd be nice if they could. Now, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is leading negotiations from the EU side. And she says, quote, Europe is ready to advance talks swiftly and decisively. European trade is currently under a 10% tariff, but the rate is scheduled to increase to 20% if a deal is not reached by early July. These things take time, but as we can see, the American economy is not going up in flames as so many predicted it would by now. Oh, yes, they did. Doom and gloom. It's actually quite the opposite. We're seeing record investment into American businesses. Like I mentioned, the latest being $14 billion committed by Japan, Nippon Steel into U.S. Steel. It's a big win for the state of Pennsylvania, especially. Here's Pennsylvania Senator Dave McCormick on that one. Listen.
Nippon has agreed to invest $14 billion into new investment into U.S. Steel. That's going to be $2.4 billion in at least a minimum in the Mon Valley, right outside of Pittsburgh. And then the control structure is going to be somewhat unique. It's a national security agreement that will be signed with the U.S. government. It'll be a U.S. CEO, a U.S. majority board, and then there'll be a golden share, which will essentially require U.S. government approval of a number of the board members. And that will allow the United States to ensure production levels aren't cut and things like that, and also allow the investment to come to the Mon Valley. In the case of Pennsylvania, this saves about 10,000 jobs, 4,000 steel workers and the surrounding jobs. But beyond that, it adds another 10,000 jobs in the building trades to build a new arc furnace that's part of the plan. So this is being extremely well received in Pennsylvania. The workers, the steel workers there are wildly excited about it, and I think it's going to be a great thing for my state.
And some estimates are that it will create a lot more jobs than that, maybe 70,000 directly and indirectly. Pennsylvania, as you know, one of the biggest battleground wins for President Trump in November of 2024. And this is a clear win for the Pennsylvanians who turned out in big numbers for him. Speaking of going in the right direction, a big announcement also from his Secretary of HHS, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Here's another big change happening in this administration. Listen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS Secretary, and I'm here today with NIH Director Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary. I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule. Last year, the Biden administration urged healthy children to get yet another COVID shot despite the lack of any clinical data to support the repeat booster strategy in children.
That ends today. It's common sense and it's good science.
There's no evidence healthy kids need it today, and most countries have stopped recommending it for children.
We're now one step closer to realizing President Trump's promise to make America healthy again.
Yep. Also a popular initiative, but now all of a sudden the mainstream media doesn't trust the CDC or its guidelines at all. The New York Times questioning, is this true? As if we weren't told to believe the CDC was our Bible for years, especially 5 years ago when we were told that the magic distance for health and safety was 6 feet. wherever that came from, nobody actually knows, and that the gardening section of Walmart needed to stay closed to keep you healthy. The thousands could gather in the streets to further racial division and protest. That was different, of course. God forbid our health experts actually issue common sense guidance for once and keep it that way. I don't think the COVID injection needs to be recommended for anyone personally, but at least this is a step in the right direction. Now, healthy kids who are still going through important phases of development and pregnant women certainly don't need an experimental drug concoction just so Big Pharma can cash in. Like the polling says, we're in the right direction right now. Democrats, meanwhile, are hyper-focused on yanking us back in the wrong direction as soon as possible, hoping to wield the familiar weapon of lawfare once again. Democrat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, your favorite, salivating at the chance to investigate President Trump as soon as possible, and even his entire family, if she gets control of the House Oversight Committee, which she's hoping for. Listen to this.
If the Democrats take over after the midterms next year, the House and or Senate, do you think they're going to push for investigations into Trump's family and the whole crypto acquisitions that he is getting?
Well, Alex, I'm glad you asked.
Here we go.
Listen, so long as we end up taking the House, which I fully anticipate that we will do, and we are going to work hard to obviously help our Senate colleagues as well, then as someone who serves on the Oversight Committee and hopes to lead the Oversight Committee, I can guarantee you that we will do what we are supposed to do as constitutionally sworn members of the House, which means that we will conduct oversight. That means that we will investigate. We will look at whether or not this president himself has violated the emoluments clause as it relates to, say, such things as getting a $400 million plane from the Qataris.
Now, never mind the fact that the jet is a gift to the Department of Defense, not Donald Trump personally, not to the individual, not to the president, but to the DOD. People like Congresswoman Crockett have no interest in facts. No, of course not. Her party is using the same playbook, the exact same playbook they used before the 2024 election, and it's embarrassing. Don't they remember how that turned out for them last time? Apparently not. Because Democrat Representative Greg Cesar wants to use the justice system to go after Elon Musk now. I can't make it up. Listen to this.
Democrats need to make clear we're not going to go easy on this guy if we retake the majority. We can use our subpoena and investigative power in a majority to look into Musk or any other billionaire that has broken any criminal laws, enriching themselves using the power of the White House.
Yeah, attack the people that are popular. It's a good thing the Trump administration yanked funding from NPR, because despite what you just heard, NPR is still running headlines like this: how Trump is using government power to target his enemies. Rules for thee, not for me, right? So there you have it. Despite the media's fear-mongering and Democrat lawfare, the future looks bright. America's on the right track. The numbers don't lie. Record optimism, booming consumer confidence, and major wins like Japan's $14 billion steel investment into Pennsylvania prove that Trump's leadership is working. Real-world results speak louder than the noise you're hearing from the left and their ridiculous headlines. All right, coming up after the break, I'm going to bring on the head pollster from Rasmussen, Mark Mitchell, to go through some of these numbers and the new polling that shows Americans like you are rallying behind this president. Don't go anywhere. This is America's Voice Live. have been discussing from the top of the program. Rasmussen reporting. In a new poll, it shows that more Americans than ever agree that we are on the right track as a country. We're headed in the right direction with President Trump at the helm. In fact, it's record-setting. Also, the Rasmussen Report's daily presidential tracking poll for today shows Donald Trump's approval rating is higher than it's been, with 53% of Americans approving of his job performance so far, 46% disapprove. From cutting waste to making America first again, it's clear that the American people are behind President Trump and his agenda. Here with me to discuss this is the head pollster at Rasmussen. It's Mark Mitchell. Mark, welcome back. I guess this buyer's remorse myth is exactly that. People don't seem to have any buyer's remorse. They seem to be pretty enthusiastic from what your numbers are showing me. What do you say?
Yeah, I'm trying to frame exactly what's going on here. Donald Trump's approval rating is 53%, net +7 today. That's essentially where it was the first week of this term. And so how would the press frame that? They would say, oh, worst honeymoon in presidential polling history or something like that. Well, I think people knew what Trump was going to bring to the fight, and he is. So I think this presidency is just all business, right? But, man, everything that they've thrown at this guy just in the last month or two with the mainstream media. You know, there was Signalgate, there was like all this stuff, the Qatari jet. They're literally trying to create whatever op they can, and it hasn't affected his approval rating whatsoever. Yeah. Remember how much they were screaming about his approval at the 100-day mark with all those fake numbers? They got
and
Trump
the tariffs, Mark. Don't forget the tariffs. They were going to collapse the economy, right? The economy was going to collapse. We were going to be in the streets. It was going to be chaos. Children would be crying. Widows would be screaming. It would be horrible. None of those things happened. None of it. It's all fiction.
Worst presidential polling at 100-day mark. The industry was able to lie him down to 7.5 points underwater. But let's not forget that in the industry, in the aggregate on Real Clear Politics, Biden spent almost all of his term underwater, at least 15 points. And so nobody was running headlines then. But this right direction number, I've talked about it a lot. Maybe people are getting bored about it. I don't know. But every time we set a new record, it's just so unprecedented because in 20 years, we've never seen anything like this. Coming into the presidency, the highest we'd ever seen was, I think, 47. Tied, right direction 47, wrong track 47. We hit 50%
this goes back how far? This goes back how many years?
2006, all the way through Obama.
I mean,
politics.
That's
Jesus.
remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. You know, and here I am. The other thing that they were telling us in April, it'll be the worst stock market since 1932. Remember that? They like that one a lot. You know, the doom, the gloom, you know, thunder in the background, lightning and rain. Today, the stock market's at 42.2. It's down a couple of hundred points today. NASDAQ, S&P, it's all stabilized. Gold's at 3,200. Everything seems to be fairly decent. Inflation is at 2.3%. Unemployment's at 4.2%. And like you said, Donald Trump is +7. I mean, if he makes a deal with the EU on trade, if he makes a deal with China on trade, if he can somehow get Russia and Ukraine to stop killing each other, I mean, his numbers could go up another 5 or 6 points, couldn't they?
I don't know if we're ever going to see a Trump approval rating over 55. There's just so many people that have been completely brainwashed. They haven't gone away. Maybe they stopped taking polls. I don't know. Listen, the fact that after everything that's been thrown at Donald Trump, he won with basically half the country, and half the country thinks the country's headed on the right track. After all this, maybe we'll get to a 55 or 56. But, you know, I think the more important thing, in my opinion, is that it seems like people are getting better at cutting through the crap. And I think that that's very important because, listen, with the stuff that he's got baked into this agenda, we could see economic upset. You got Stephen Miller out there screaming at ICE and DHS. He wants deportations up to 3,000 people a day. That's 1.1 million people a year on top of probably what is copious amounts of self-deportation. That's massively deflationary when you take a pretty meaningful chunk of 1% of the population and just kick them out of the country. And so who knows? Our country's not cut out for deflation. And we ask people, they say, oh, yeah, Trump's actions are likely to cause a recession, and yet they still support this guy. So I think it's all baked in. I think people understand
it hasn't caused
fundamentally
there's one of the places I go to kind of just gauge where people are, Mark, and maybe you do this. I go to check the gas prices on AAA. Today they're down again, 316. A couple of weeks ago they were 318. A year ago they were 360. And you go to places like, I don't know, Arkansas 278, Mississippi 265, Missouri 285, under $3 a gallon. This affects people's lives. It means they have more money to spend on eggs, which have also become cheaper, and on everything else. If we could get the interest rates down, just think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that approval rating because I think that people come to places like this because they finally decide, well, gas is less than $3. The war is over, wherever it may be, that they can get a war over. I think you can go up another 2 or 3 points. Maybe I'm just an optimist that people will finally believe the truth and not all the fear-mongering. Mark, I'm kind of an optimist that way.
Well, I think what people want is an economic rebalancing. And unfortunately, there's no way to do that and keep everybody happy, in my personal opinion. So we talk about the housing market, and from a Trump public opinion perspective, I really honestly do think that probably a housing crash has a lot to like about it with the mortgage rates where they are. And I know that's horrible for people who are holding a lot of property and that it's a major part of their portfolio, and it might mean a change in their level of generational wealth. But things are not going in the right direction in this country up until now. We've asked are you better off than you were 4 years ago question. We asked, will today's children be better off than their parents? Only 22% say yes. But we have some pretty fresh new polling. I even kind of forget if we published this yet or not, but we will soon if we haven't. Was your standard of living better when you were a teenager or now? And the country says better, teenager, 40% to 38%. But what's important is that every single age bracket says that their standard of living was better when they were a kid, except for 65 and older.
That, though. I would dispute that insofar as this. What do you pay for a smartphone today? $1,000, $1,200. What do you pay for the laptop computer everybody has? What do you pay for your gaming system? These are all things I didn't have as a teenager. How much money do we invest monthly? Thousands of dollars for what's basically entertainment. My standard of living today is better because of medication, communication, and transportation. It's all improved since the time I was a teenager. All of those things have gotten better. So, again, I believe in this country. Mark, I'm an optimist. I'm a homer. I'm okay with it. And I think we're going to do good. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah. No, I'm just telling you what people think, and being able to have all that stuff isn't necessarily better. I would go back to the 1980s, 100%. I had 3 Lego sets, 1 bike, and probably 4 Nintendo games, and that's all we could afford because things were super expensive. I'm just saying that people, 50, 60 years ago, the people who now say their standard of living is better grew up in a time when you could buy a house, cash, drive around a car, have a family of 2.5 children on a single income, and that is gone. That is off the table. People can't even find mates in order to start families. So this all comes into standard of living, in my opinion. It's all part of this nexus of we've got all this concentration of, we've talked about it.
One thing for sure, Mark, one thing for sure. Stepping on this is a lot less painful than stepping on Lego. I just throw it out there. Just fact. Mark Mitchell, thank you for all you do. We'll talk to you again soon.
Great being here.
Greatly appreciate it. There you have it. His numbers don't lie. I think we're in better shape now. But I understand his point. The nostalgia for the 80s, for all those great things. I mean, where do you come down on it? Think about it. All right, coming up after the break with the big, beautiful bill moving on from the House. Some experts calling for big changes before it gets out of the Senate. Details coming up. It's the one big, beautiful bill. It's out of the House, in the Senate now. A lot of good components in the bill, like making the 2017 tax cuts permanent, good for most Americans. But many Republicans, and me too, concerned with the level of spending that is still in there. And just because there are some concerns doesn't mean the bill can't be revised and passed in the Senate, but some things have to happen. The National Taxpayers Union has some suggestions for changes the Senate could make to deliver the best bill for the American people. Joining me now to discuss this and the recommendations, the president of the National Taxpayers Union, Pete Sepp. Pete, nice to see you today.
Always great to be here.
All right, so look, for example, Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, has been on the show a couple of times just recently and says he is a no. He cannot support this level of spending, which would add $2 trillion to our debt each of the next 10 years, maybe even more, to take us to about $60 trillion in debt. I agree with him. If that happens, we enter a debt crisis at some point. We're no better than Greece. And when Greece entered their debt crisis here a few years ago, they came in and took anybody that had $1 million or more in savings, they took half, they being the government. And if you don't think that can happen in America, you're kidding yourself. We need to get this spending reduced. How do we do it?
Yeah, we certainly do. Well, we have to start with the House's bill, and we have to ramp it up. What the House's bill did is control the growth of federal spending, made some cuts in a few specific programs, but overall, federal spending is still going to go up. Over the life of this bill, we're going to spend $84 trillion instead of the baseline amount of about $86 trillion. We've got to get that number lower. And I know that there are at least 4 senators in the Republican caucus. Besides Ron Johnson, you've got Rick Scott, you've got Rand Paul, you possibly have Tom Tillis, all saying we've got to do better on the spending side of the ledger. If you've got 4 Republicans saying that and unwilling to budge, the bill's not going to make it through the Senate. Not even J.D. Vance can get us out of that with a tie-breaking vote.
That's correct. That means it'll be over. And I still think that Mitch McConnell's probably a no vote just because he wants to spite Donald Trump. So you might have 5 in that column potentially. But okay, what can be trimmed out? What can be done? Look, the Democrats have the same solution every time. Oh, just raise taxes. Oh, just do this. Just stick it to the American. Well, we'll only tax people making over $1 bazillion a year. It's always a lie. It's always a lie because everybody always gets stuck with a bill, Pete. You, me, everybody. Doesn't matter what your tax level is because people at the bottom end are picking up taxes in different forms. How do we cut the spending? What can we really reduce to make it acceptable? And how come we can't get back to 2019 spending levels before COVID? Why can't we get to that point?
Yeah, we should. And in fact, that would mean a pretty dramatic pareback in federal spending. But even then, we still have the accumulating debt to worry about. I think, first of all, we need to put everything back on the table. That means defense spending in many cases. We are still spending far too much at the Pentagon, and the House's bill actually increases it. We have to look at paring back a lot of the military aid going to foreign countries. We cannot be the nation's military aid bank. We have got to look more closely at clawing back the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act money. There's upwards of $100 billion of unobligated funds left over from that bill that President Biden signed. Those are just a few.
You make a great point there, Pete. And this is one of the things that irritates a lot of Americans, myself included. You get to the end of a bill, end of a process, end of a fiscal year, and there's $100 million left. Oh, let's hurry and spend it. Why can't these people, for once, say, you know what? It's the working men and women of this country that paid this money, and let's send it back and use it for something else. If we didn't use it, you see what they're using COVID money for splash parks and recreational areas and all sorts of things that have nothing at all to do with COVID, never did. It was abusing the American taxpayer. Real quickly, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we actually need to do more in the entitlement reform area. You know, Social Security is going to go broke in less than 10 years if we don't act to trim the growth of the program. That's necessary. Same thing with Medicaid. We're not talking about cutting it, even in the House bill. We're talking about bringing the growth rate to 3%. If we can't do that, Medicaid will not survive, and poor people will really be hurting, aside from the Democrats' rhetoric.
Exactly right. Pete, always appreciate you being here. Thank you for sharing some time with us here today.
You bet.
All right. Up after the break, a top medical school accreditor has suspended diversity requirements after President Trump signed an executive order directing Pam Bondi, among others, to crack down on DEI. Details straight ahead. Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education has announced that it's suspending its diversity requirements due to changes of state and federal laws. This change was made just weeks after President Trump signed an executive order which empowers the Education Department to assess whether to suspend accreditors that push DEI mandates. President Trump's order specifically highlighted ACGMES's instructions for medical schools to recruit and retain individuals from racial and ethnic minority groups who are underrepresented, as they say, in medicine. The president also directing the Attorney General, the Secretary of Education, and others to work with HHS to investigate whether or not DEI requirements are constitutionally unlawful. Here with me now to discuss this is campus reform correspondent and new resident of Washington, D.C., Emily Sturge, who graduated and came to work for TPUSA in the nation's capital. Emily, congratulations on the new job, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is an important approach. Look, we see this happening all the time. Oh, if you're in this group, then you're going to get this advantage. If you're in this group, we need to stop that. We need the best people to do the job, whether it's being a doctor or a nurse or be in business, whatever it is. It's time to set that aside, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And the medical industry is such a fantastic example of this because it's common sense that most Americans would agree that they would like that their doctor be judged based on standards, on qualifications, on their ability to provide effective medical care rather than their skin color. But for far too long, accrediting agencies, which set forth standards that they certify institutions and programs like these medical programs, they were using standards of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now, thanks to President Trump's executive order, we're starting to see these accrediting bodies go ahead and suspend these DEI requirements, which, of course, is a win for students, a win for meritocracy, and I would argue is a win for patients, anybody who is receiving medical care at the end of the day.
Yeah, you know, and your job at campus reform, it's not going to get any easier because it seems to me, and maybe I'm being jaded here, but they keep trying to hide these things. They change the name. They move it to a different office. They sneak around, you know, and they try, oh, we're not doing that. I don't think your job gets any easier. It might get more difficult because you have to sniff it out and figure out what they're doing and where and say, look, you can't do that, right? That's kind of where you are now.
I can guarantee you at the Leadership Institute Campus Reform, yes, we are sniffing it out. We are watching as universities are renaming, rebranding their DEI departments, their course titles, their position names, but we are still keeping track of what's going on and we are always reporting on it. But I do want to talk specifically about these accrediting agencies. We've reported at Campus Reform that this is a trend that's happening. The American Bar Association is another example. That's an accrediting agency that certifies law school programs. And beforehand, they had something called Standard 206, where they required that law school programs recruit and retain individuals based on DEI principles. And now we're seeing the American Bar Association is just one of the accrediting agencies that's suspending those DEI requirements, which I certainly think is a positive trend. It's a positive step in the right direction.
It's a positive trend, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I don't trust the American Bar Association because a lot of these lawyers that are being trained in these DEI law schools are being trained to fight exactly what you're doing. I'm just going to say I think it's suspect. Because a lot of these lawyers are at schools that have DEI programs for their lawyers. That's how they train these people so they can go in and commit lawfare. We'll see what happens, and Godspeed for you to do it, Emily. And I think, and I hope you can. But like I said, it's going to be a lot of work ahead. I'll give you the last word.
There's a lot of work to do, and I actually went through the 50-page document of the requirements that this medical school accrediting agency was judging programs like medical programs, like fellowships, postdoctoral programs. They were requiring that universities for these programs recruit individuals from underrepresented groups, and they were actually saying that in the admissions process, race should be a factor. But of course, we know from the landmark Harvard Supreme Court case back in 2023, race-based admissions are unconstitutional. I'm excited to see that now we have an administration in office standing up for the Constitution, standing up for students and for meritocracy.
Well, Emily Sturge, keep doing the work because it needs to carry on because they're going to continue to fight us every step of the way. Emily Sturge, thank you for being here, as always.
So much for having me.
All right. It's a new day in America and a new administration in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of excitement and optimism about the future, but the reality is there's a lot of work to do, especially when it comes to fixing our broken healthcare system. The truth is the forces that are responsible for breaking our healthcare system aren't going to simply go away. The challenges our system faces won't disappear overnight. Now more than ever, you need to be prepared, and that's where the Wellness Company comes in. It's doctors, our medical professionals that you can trust, and their line of prescription medical kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy. Whether it's the medical emergency kit, the contagion kit, the first aid kit, or the travel kit, these prescription kits contain an assortment of life-saving medications and guidebooks to assist in the proper use of these medications. From the flu to strep throat, COVID to the bird flu, a trip down the street or a trip around the world, the Wellness Company has a prescription kit designed to keep you and your family safe. Make America healthy again starts at home. Do your part and protect the health of you and your family. Go to twc.health/voice today and order. That's twc.health/voice. Use the promo code VOICE and you will save 10%. We'll have more about another activist liberal judge attempting to stop Donald Trump's agenda, the American voters' agenda, after the break. The Treasury Department, Scott Bessent, and the Department of Government Efficiency official indicated a collaboration to focus on system upgrades, but a court order temporarily bars the Trump administration from carrying out any further reductions. Weird, right? Several lawsuits have been filed challenging the legality of the government workforce mass firings. One complaint filed by the American Federation of Government Employees cited an IRS memo detailing a Treasury RIF that would reduce the IRS by 40%. Judge Susan Ilston granted the union's motion halting any large-scale rifts affecting several government agencies, nothing short of an injustice, if you ask me. Here with me to discuss this, the CEO of the Alliance for the IRS Accountability and the former Chief of Staff, Chuck Flynn. Chuck, nice to see you today. Look,
Steve,
why are these, there's almost 700 federal district judges, and every one of them apparently thinks that they can do as they please and dictate policy of this administration. It's absurd, honestly. What do you make of this particular case?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. This is another example of lawfare. What these unions, these federal employee labor unions did is they went venue shopping out in California, out in San Francisco for an activist judge who issued a preliminary injunction saying that the president can't institute these reduction in force plans that he has for the federal government. Actually applied it to 22 federal agencies. And the administration will go ahead and appeal to the Ninth Circuit, which is traditionally always one of the most overturned circuits in the country. But, I'd raise 2 points for the people at home that are viewing right now. And one, you've made about the lawfare. Another example of the left using judges to just go ahead and obstruct the president's agenda. But there's another point that I want to make here. President Reagan was able to fire over 11,000 air traffic controllers in 1981. Well, why can't President Trump simply right-size the workforce of the federal government, most of whom, or I shouldn't say most, but a lot of whom aren't doing their job? It just doesn't make any sense, and it shouldn't be happening.
No, it doesn't
the
make
IRS
any sense.
Is a prime example.
Yeah, it certainly is. And look, we've seen other examples where Joe Biden would sign an executive order for one item or another. Donald Trump came in and signed an executive order to make that go away, and the court said, oh, you can't do that. Look, federal district court judges are local judges. They should be limited to their districts. And we've had Supreme Court rulings on this. And if the Supreme Court doesn't get this fixed, then every chief executive, every president going forward is going to be handicapped on this issue and everything else. Either these district court judges need to stay in their lane, or we are in real trouble here. And that's what I would consider a constitutional crisis. What say you?
Well, sure. Why should the judicial branch be able to tell President Trump how to run the executive branch? These are all executive branch agencies. And look at the IRS. Let's just take a look at their job performance for a second. Secretary Bessent was talking about modernization. They're 30 years behind and $15 billion over budget. There was a Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration report earlier this month. They issued $21.4 billion in improper payments last year. And then you've got this issue of political targeting. They've got a deep state hit squad over there that's led by Lois Lerner's former top deputy that's going after businesses and partnerships and just fining them into oblivion using a revenue ruling that used to be an option of last resort, but they've radicalized it and made it an option of first resort. And so they're not doing their job. And then, I would say they're also obstructing the president's economic agenda, undermining it.
I would agree with that. And look, I think the Internal Revenue Service undermines America in general on many days. And so I think there's somebody that should be held accountable. And look, if we want to reduce the workforce, whether it's the Internal Revenue Service or any other government agency, it is the president who makes that decision. He's supposed to be able to run the executive branch, which is almost all of these agencies. That's the way it is supposed to work. It's the way it was designed. And look, none of these federal district judges were even included in the Constitution. They weren't part of the deal. They were added later by Congress. So either the Supreme Court can rein them in, or the Republicans in the House can reel them in, but somebody has to get the job done. Otherwise, it's an unworkable situation. I'll give you the last word.
Steve, once again, I think you're right over the target here. And one of the interesting things about the judge's order with a preliminary injunction is her reasoning was that she said the president had to consult with Congress about this. It's not something that seems to make any sense. Once again, President Reagan was able to fire over 11,000 air traffic controllers in 1981 for not doing their job. So why can't President Trump simply right-size the workforce using an executive order? He's not just firing everybody just willy-nilly. He's saying, look, if you're not doing your job, you're not being efficient, then you're not going to be a part of the federal workforce. Being a member of the federal workforce, it's not a lifetime job, okay? It's not a lifetime commitment. There should be certain standards that employees have to meet.
They like to think it is, and look, those are all union jobs. The union has power. The union has money. The union has lobbyists. And that's another big part of the problem. We'll save that for another day. Chuck Flynn, thank you for being here.
Steve, thanks so much.
Really appreciate it. Well, tax day, speaking of all this, may have passed, but for millions of Americans, the real trouble, it's just getting started. If you missed the April 15th deadline and still owe back taxes, the IRS, well, they're ramping up enforcement. Every day you wait makes things worse. There are over 5,000 new tax liens filed daily. Tools like property seizures, bank levies, wage garnishments. The IRS is applying pressure at levels that we haven't seen in a very long time. Increased administrative scrutiny means collections are moving faster, and it puts you in harm's way. The good news, there's still time for Tax Network USA to help. Self-employed or a business owner, even if your books are a mess, they've got it covered at Tax Network USA because they specialize in cleaning up financial chaos and getting you back on track fast. Even after the deadline, it's not too late to regain control. Get your hands back on the wheel. Your consultation is free. And acting now can stop penalties, threatening letters, and surprise levies before it all escalates. Call 1-800-905-8000 or visit tnusa.com/wrap. You may have missed April the 15th, but you haven't run out of options, at least not yet. Let Tax Network USA help before the IRS makes the next move and puts you in a bad spot. Now, After the break, we'll have a story that reminds us of just how wonderful America is. We do it every day. Plus, answers to the America's Voice question of the day. Do you think Canada will become the 51st state in exchange for protection by the proposed Golden Dome missile defense system? Why or why not? It's coming up. All right, what makes America wonderful? We do it every day right here. Why? I want to put a smile on your face and tell you what a great country you live in, because you do. What makes America wonderful? Well, today's story comes to us from Lincoln County, Missouri, or Missouri, as they say there, where a brave officer rushed into the scene to save a passenger from a car that caught on fire. A 23-year-old driver had derailed and crashed his car into a tree on Old Moscow Mills Road, and swiftly after the collision, the car started to catch fire. EMS officials arrived on the scene and started fighting the fire, but it was K-9 officer and chaplain Matt Schneider who ran up to the wreck head first. In a remarkable and selfless act of courage, Officer Schneider pulled the driver out of the burning vehicle and dragged him away before the car was completely engulfed in flames. The victim, who remains unnamed, is said to have suffered burns, but thanks to Schneider's bravery, he remains in good condition and survived this crash. Look at that picture there. Officer Schneider set to receive formal recognition for his heroism in a public ceremony at Troy City Hall in Missouri. It takes determination and an overall sense of morals to join the police force, but being prepared to put your life on the line to help your fellow man or woman is surely going above and beyond. And Officer Schneider's heroism shows us what makes America wonderful. All right, the America's Voice question of the day, real quick. Do you think Canada will become the 51st state in exchange for protection from the proposed Golden Dome missile defense system? Why or why not? Lisa Latea, I don't want them. Most of the country is liberal. We actually do want Alberta there, Lisa. Ken Hartman, do we really want to give Canadians seats in our government? From what I've seen, they are as bad or worse than our Democrats. Not in Alberta, they're not, my friends. Sharon Graves, no, maybe a partner, but not a part of the USA. I think you guys are missing the big picture here. Jeannie Blaylock, the real question is, do we need another liberal state? It wouldn't be a liberal state, especially if it was just Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. Richie Lupo, Canada is too liberal for me. We get enough Democrat wackos here in the States. You know, if it was just Canada that way, I would see that you guys are probably on the money. And Trish Hicks, no, this may be another art of the deal where you ask for too much to see where the customer is willing to go. Well, there is that. All right, greatly appreciate you being here. Don't forget to follow me on X, Instagram, Truth Social. We've got a movement going. Love to have you on board with all these social media platforms. Join me tomorrow morning to kick off your broadcast day with the Steve Gruber Show right here on Real America's Voice. And then I will see you back for America's Voice Live.